So here's the thing, right? I'm listening to these vlogs, I'm reading these articles, and you have every now and again these exposés that kind of talk about the differences between the have and have-nots, right? The attitudes that the haves exhibit, the have-nots don't exhibit. And I think sometimes they don't take into account reality and the fact that just being poor is not permanent. They account for that, but they don't really extrapolate or provide any type of information and understanding about how to overcome poor habits and mindsets, right? And before you can address an issue, you have to understand it, right? And that's what I wanted to talk about today, because at the end of the day, we all know being poor is expensive, right? It's very expensive. It's far more expensive than being well off. And one of the habits that can cause a great deal of expense in your life, and I'm not just talking about personally or even professionally, but even from the standpoint of operating a business, is adopting a mindset or really not even I would call a mindset, but an existence that is predicated upon fight or flight. Now, what do I mean by that, right? One of my favorite television shows back in the day was National Geographic. I used to watch it all the time, get excited, right? You see the lions, they're in the safari, they're doing their thing, they're eyeballing the gazelles, they're sneaking up, they're getting ready to go ahead and do what they need to do to get a meal for the day. And all of a sudden the gazelles pop up, right? And they notice, oh, the lion is there, right? The lion's creeping on us. And then they get really excited, heads come up, right? They start chirping, making noises. And at that moment, right, fight or flight kicks in. They are laser focused on survival. Reflexes, eyesight, whatever senses they need to utilize, it's on 10, right? So speed, endurance, etc., they are off like a rocket. And it's very useful, right? It's very important for them to have that fight or flight moment, right? That response, because that is going to be the difference between them surviving or becoming that lion's meal, right? It's the same thing when you see the wolves chasing the oxen, right? The oxen decides to fight for a moment, then take flight, and then fight for a moment, and it looks like the wolves are going to come up short, right? And what's the lion? What's the wolves? It's life, right? Oftentimes when BS.com happens, it happens in bunches, right? And it's very useful for us as human beings to also exhibit that behavior, right? When something is dangerous, when it can have a very bad impact on your family or on your welfare, fight or flight is a necessary response. If in business, all of a sudden a very important client makes a request and it's just got to get done. Sometimes that's just what happens. When you're first starting out, oftentimes you're in fight or flight, right? You're beta testing your product. You're trying to get those transactions. You're trying to get those customers so you can generate enough revenue to do the things you need to do. So it can serve us very well also. But here's the thing. It's only supposed to be temporary. So if you're in fight or flight 24/7, there's a reason why it's problematic. Number one, look, I would compare it to exercising, right? When your body gets into an anaerobic state. So you're working out, you're exhausted, but you know you can go further, you can go harder, so that's what you do. Even at the point of exhaustion, you do a couple more repetitions. You are able to get in a couple more sets, right? Because the body stops feeding on the glucose as opposed to the oxygen. So you're oxygen deprived, but there's still some glucose there and your body feeds on that. And you're able to do that for a while, but there reaches a point where you start having a diminishing return, if you will, right? You just can't keep that up indefinitely. And look, it's just like the gazelle, right? One lion starts chasing the gazelle, the fight or flight is working at first, and then the second and the third lion, right, gets involved in the chase. And all of a sudden, sometimes the gazelle catches the L, right? Why is that? Because the gazelle can't stay in that anaerobic fight or flight state all day, every day. It has to be able to take a break, right? We're much the same way. When the wolves, right, when life starts coming at you, when the trials and tribulations start coming in bunches, right, the wolves know that oxen can't keep it up, right? They run it down. The oxen is stronger, may even be not faster, but fast enough. But over the course of time, those wolves know that this oxen is going to succumb and we're going to get our meal, right? And that's exactly what happens to us, right? Whether, once again, personally, professionally, or otherwise, you can't keep that up. It's stress. That's what it is. It's stress. And when you're focused on survival, you neglect some things, just like that gazelle, right? That gazelle is not thinking about eating properly. It's trying to get away. That gazelle is not thinking about shelter or doing things that are in its best interest in terms of acquiring shelter, preening itself, cleaning itself, basically doing all the things it needs to do to be healthy and balanced. It is focused on getting out of Dodge, right? Doing what it needs to do, not become that lion's meal. And we as human beings, it's the same thing. It's the same deal, right? When you're in fight or flight mode, you're not investing in yourself. You're not focused on professional and personal development, becoming bigger than your problems, right? Instead of complaining and making excuses, you let your excuses become the reasons why you will until. But you're not focused on that. You're just focused on that immediate emergency that's taking place, right? You're not invested. Same thing with your business. You're not investing in your business. You're moving from transaction to transaction to transaction to transactions. You're trying to keep that cash flow going. But that becomes problematic because if you're focused on just transactions every single time, you aren't able to set aside the time to be involved in branding and business planning. You don't set aside the time and resources to properly market your business, right? You can't focus on relationship building the way you would like to because you're trying to get that next transaction. There are certain appointments, there are certain, seminars, there are certain networking events that you don't attend because you're literally in fight or flight. You are fighting to survive, right? Personal development, once again, we neglect it. Business coaching, you don't take advantage of it, right? It's important. You know it's important, but you don't do it anyway, right? Educational seminars, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You neglect these things because, once again, you're in that fight or flight. That's why it's so problematic because all these things are required. They're necessary. They're important, but they're not urgent. But it's the important that builds your capacity to do more, that allows you to grow and to scale, right? At the end of the day, your success as a business owner, professional, even personally, is going to be predicated upon your ability to become more valuable, right? To be able to offer service, to be able to solve bigger problems, and to be able to do it rapidly and do it in such a way where you can solve those bigger problems faster and serve more people. But if you're not building the capacity to do that because you're in fight or flight, it becomes very difficult to survive long term. And that's what happens, personally, professionally, and otherwise. We know those people in our lives that are going from urgent matter to urgent matter to urgent matter. And it's not like they're not working hard. It's not like they're not intelligent. That has nothing to do with it. But because they're focused on the fight or flight, they're not thinking 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the line. And so they find themselves in a repeated cycle over and over again. That's what the fight or flight does to you, right? So you're basically sprinting from burnout to burnout. And look, here's a way of thinking about it, right? If you go to the gym and you do a burnout, you push yourself past exhaustion. Ideally, what you want to do over the day or the next 2 days is you want to eat right. You want to pay attention to what you're taking into your body. You want to make sure you get enough sleep, right? You want to make sure that you take the time and do the things you need to recover. So in that recovery and overcoming of the pain, you grow stronger, right? Your muscles get stronger, your endurance increases, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? But we know if we don't get that sleep, if you don't eat properly, if you don't allow your muscles to recover and you jump back in the gym again or jump back to activity again, it's kind of like what happens with football players and basketball players over the course of a season. If they're not getting that recovery time, the injuries start happening, right? It is what it is. It's the same thing. And so now you start doing things to alleviate the pain associated with the injuries that are caused. And now the cycle becomes really dangerous. Now it becomes really problematic. And that's why this fight or flight thing is so debilitating, right? Because now you're investing energies, money, time, resources, et cetera, trying to numb the pain, right? And that is when it goes south real quick. So that's why those injuries happen, and that's why fight or flight happens in people's lives, and not permanently, well, sometimes it can permanently injure you, right? Because now you start developing habits and ways of doing things and ways of thinking. It's like a vicious circle. And so that's why the flight or fight mindset is so problematic. You got to find a way to press pause. You got to find a way to focus on the things that are important so you can get out of that vicious cycle. So I just wanted to put that out there. Once again, the bottom line is, I think sometimes when these articles come out and when these editorials, et cetera, vlogs, what have you, oftentimes people are talking about, okay, these are the symptoms, but what exactly does this mean? Like, how does it apply to me? How can I resolve these matters? What thinking is required? What tools are required, right, to overcome these issues? So wanted to put that out there. Hey, as always, if you like the content, if you like what I just shared, visit CATCHJSBUFORD. Everyone have a fantastic afternoon. Goodbye for now.